If you get into doing avionics work at all, or if you're just a regular mechanic who does troubleshooting, you are going to get involved in electrical troubleshooting, and a big part of that is making sure that the spaghetti that is in the wiring diagram manual actually is recreated correctly in the airplane, and you have not run into any chafed wires, broken wires, cross-shorted wires, or any other failures caused by corrosion, overheating, and you name it. And in the install that I've been doing, I've run into an issue like that, so I am in the middle of it. So I figured I'd show you guys some specialized things that I have as a spark chaser for some of these I've bought, some of these I've created. Now, thinking of things I've bought, this right here is a set. This is actually aimed. I got it from my Snap-on guy. I'm sure you could probably buy it off of Amazon, probably for less than I paid. But this right here is really aimed at the automotive market. It has different alligator leads with the banana plugs on the back of them that are designed to be able to plug right into your meter. They're color coded, and on the other end is just a plain old alligator clip with some teeth right there. You can see grabbing onto different probes and pins. And then what it has here is so you can actually have these tiny little picks. That's a rubber cover that comes off, and this right here, these are aimed at automotive, so mostly they're all just a very small diameter, very fine wire, because as you know, if you've ever worked on a car, the pins you're going after, they're all tiny. They don't use very big diameter stuff. It's a good set. I actually haven't used it yet, but when I saw it, I said, you know what, I have to have it for that just in case. So I will have it. I haven't used it yet, as I said, but I don't do avionics as much as I used to. Some other things though, like here is a tray for a Garmin GPS. Connectors are way in the back. Pulling that whole tray and the radio stack itself apart and yanking it out is way more trouble than I want to do to break those connectors free to be able to go after them. So this is something I created at another job I worked at, and it is simply a piece of very fine stiff wire. Usually you look at music wires, things like that. I think the place I worked, we actually used these to make one of the latches on a cargo pod spring loaded so that they wouldn't come open in flight from vibration. But on the end is crimped a connector pin, just like we were installing at the time. This one's a female, and that one is a male. And going at the back of a tray, now they're heat shrinked so that if they touch the tray they don't ground. But using this, we'll use the female one, get in there, and I have to be able to read the pin numbers obviously, but I can actually isolate, I can count pins, and if I can line it up, I can actually slide this right over the pin that I want to be doing a continuity check on. And the other end, this one has a male on the other end, but either way, I would then clamp onto it with my lead. Now, this is a test lead. It's a regular old Fluke meter. Fluke has the name in the industry. Nothing else is better. This right here, and I got this, I love the coil cord. I've only ever found these from Mac. And I don't even know if you can get them anymore. These continue to break. The banana plug clip down here keeps falling off, and I keep stripping it back and soldering it back into the banana clip that goes into my meter. But the big thing with this is the bed of nails. Now I have found leads that have the bed of nails. If you can see, very, very fine teeth underneath this big fat one right here. And this is a flat thing. This will even puncture through the insulation on a wire, and so you can read it without having to get to an end or disconnect it or cut it or something. And then you have the spike, which is good for, like, I don't know, battery cables, things like that. it's not super healthy for a wire, but I have never actually found serious issues from using the bed of nails. And you get the clamp on the end, so then I will bring that up here, and with this I can clamp on with those little jaws. You can see the serrated teeth that are there, and now my meter is going to be reading. I can put that in, leave it, it will hold, and then I can go over here to the other end of my harness, which I am having a problem with. I don't know why. It was working the other day. And then I used the next specialized thing, and this is something else I entirely created myself, and as you can see I have a mess of them, but a lot of these, and I have different ones, there's a pin and then multiple layers of heat shrink in order to make it stiff. And I have this set up, and the other end, I don't know, probably has bare wire. Could be very long, because sometimes you really need to go a long distance when you're doing this. Oh, this has a test light in it. Remember, I didn't make this to check for voltage somewhere. But right here, with this, if this was the right size pin, I could stick that in there, clamp the other end of the wire into the other jaw on my multimeter, and I have it. Now I have, in this, here's a good female pin. This would be good for certain types, but if you look at this connector, those are female pins, so that won't work. So I have some extremely long ones. I can do the full length of a fuselage or a wing on the average size aircraft I work on. Here's one where I crimped on a pin that worked with the connector I was working with at the time. I have, it's very tiny, well, pretty small, and that's a male and a female. But this right here, these are lifesavers, and anytime you see a pin lying on the floor or a pin anywhere, grab it. I have a whole box full of random spare pins, and on this installation we didn't have one type of pin that we really needed in order to make the connections in the back of the 650, but because I've worked on Garmin's, I had a bunch of those very small pins scattered in my scrounge box, and I was able to make the installation connections that I needed to. Some of these have ring terminals, some of these are setups for doing testing. Yeah, like here, this goes on an alternator lug or a generator and makes two different connections. This was for a particular test, and then it ran to a third thing, and I could connect my meter right onto it. And it's a specialized thing, and if I ever work on caravans again, I'll need it, but otherwise probably not so much. But things like that are lifesavers. Alligator clips, you can buy those. This right here, that was a connector. I think it was on an alternator, an automotive type alternator on an aircraft. Here's another one though. All those kind of things, you want to make those up, you want to hold on to them. Get a pouch, put them all together. I could separate them a little better, but you don't need them enough that they really go beyond just keeping them all in one big pouch. But just ideas. And then of course, as you get older, and even when you're not so old, wicked cheap Harbor Freight. It magnifies quite a bit, and then it has a second magnifier, but you're going to find to do this, you got to get right up close to whatever you're looking at. Like you got to be about that close to really use the second layer. And then there's a third one that goes on the front. It's a little flip down thing. I have that somewhere, but I took it off because I have never found it to be useful. That's like if you're digging a splinter out of your finger, that level of detail. I never need that. It has little lights on the side, but they're garbage, and I took them off because they were more, basically I needed a flashlight to tell if they were off or on because they're so dim. I'm still trying to figure out some sort of LED to stick on the side here to give me good illumination the way I need. But there's the things that you really need. Obviously, learn your wiring diagrams. I've worked with guys that couldn't do it, believe it or not. I think of it like plumbing. I've been doing this for years, and it helps me to think of water flowing better than electricity going anywhere. But something really cheap like this from Harbor Freight, I haven't found a better quality one somewhere else, and it works, so why not? Make your own test leads, grab any pins you see and hold on to them, and find ones different sizes so you can connect on to whatever you might have to need. And you know, if you see a coil of wire, it's pretty cheap. You don't even have to use aviation wire if it's just for troubleshooting. You can use whatever you want. Heat shrink will really help with making things stiffer, to be able to push them onto connectors or to keep them from touching the base of the pin where it could short against another one while you're troubleshooting. Sometimes you get, like on these Garmins, you get a billion pins on one connector, like 70 some pins or 100 and something pins, and sometimes you're doing two pins right next to each other and they could touch. So that's why you want to heat shrink everything. And yeah, don't kill yourself. This aircraft, everything was working yesterday, and in the morning, by the afternoon it stopped. This morning I turned it on, and the 650 and the lower G5 decided they weren't going to come on. And eventually, after fooling around, the 650 came on, but the G5 wouldn't. And then I walked away from the aircraft after shutting everything off and came back, and the lower G5 was on, even though I had checked and there was power at the breaker the whole time. The avionics do really weird things. This is in the middle of an installation as well, and in the middle of the calibration at this point and the configuration things, and it's just the way things go sometimes. But yeah, make yourself some tools like this if you're going to be dealing with radio trays, and if you do line work, you're more likely to do that. Now obviously, usually this is an avionics specific thing. I just happen to do avionics, engines, everything. Sometimes in airlines you'll be more specialized in that, but you get into GA, you get into having the experience in the background, and you'll do stuff like that no matter what. And then it's just a matter of, like what I'm dealing with right now, I'm going back and tracing out the wirings again. I already did this once before I turned it on. They all were good, but now things are swearing at me up and down that they are not seeing certain wires, they're not seeing certain connections. I have to find out why. That's the life of a spark chaser.